learned, especially if your parents were not very affectionate with you. It takes a lot that, when you have your own children, to be different. We kind of just mirror the parenting practices of our own parents, don't we? Yeah, that's what we do. We just copy what we saw growing up, and we do the same, because apparently you grow up a well-adjusted man or woman. So if you raise your own kids in the same way your parents raised you, they'll also grow up well-adjusted. But I'm sure there were things that you yearned to have from your parents that you did not receive. I know for me personally, my father was a very busy man. Life was tough growing up in Cape Town. My dad worked a lot, so he didn't get to spend time with us. In fact, most of the men in my community didn't really spend time with their children, play, cricket or rugby or football with their kids and take their kids on hikes, even though we have some of the most amazing hiking trails in South Africa. No, we did none of this because you're so busy. But wouldn't it be nice to do those things with your parents? Yeah, it would be great. So you can learn a lot of good things from your parents and their parents about parenting, but there are things that you're going to have to cut out there because it doesn't really correspond with two things. Firstly, with the sunnah, with the way of the Prophet, and number two, it doesn't correspond with what we now know from child development and psychology and other things. So we have to change. Things that were acceptable 50 years ago might not be acceptable now. Like my wife tells me that in Germany, that her grandmother was telling her that they used to put beer and mix it with the baby's formula. Why? Why would they do such a thing? To cause the baby to become drowsy and sleepy, and it makes it easier to sleep. So they were putting beer in the baby's formula. But if you've ever been to Bavaria, where my wife is from, you'll notice that people have beer like with breakfast. Have you been to Bavaria? If you've been there, it doesn't matter what time it is of the year. People are having their breakfast, and they're having their whatever, bread or whatever. And there's this massive jug of beer on the table as well. And it's 10 a.m. in the morning. Because in Bavaria, I know I'm laboring on this point, but in Bavaria, beer is considered a food. It is not taxed like everything else. Like, that is how much how important beer is in that particular society. But khair, we move on, inshallah. All right. Once the Prophet ﷺ was carrying his granddaughter Zainab in the prayer. Now, this shows us that it is permissible, it's okay for you to carry your child while you are praying. There's no problem there. And it also shows how much affection the Prophet had, that while he was leading the Muslims in prayer, he was carrying his daughter in prayer as well. I remember doing this somewhere, and I held my son and I prayed with him, and then after the salah, I could see the people were, is that prayer valid? Is that okay for you to do? They looked a bit confused, and so I